Hey everybody, Professor Moore here. So as a historian, one of the things that I often think about is just how much ancient Rome influenced the world and especially the United States. Almost every aspect of our political world was inspired by Rome. To start with, our political system is directly inspired by the Roman Republican model. Our Senate is directly modeled on the Roman Senate, and so is the name senator, which in Roman times referred to the most senior political officials. The modern word candidate comes from a Roman word referring to the special white togas that Romans wore during a political election campaign. Today, politicians often give speeches from a rostrum, another word that comes from ancient Rome. The base of the main platform for speakers in the Roman Forum was decorated with the bronze rams of enemy warships that were captured from the city of Antium during the Latin War. The Latin word for rams is rostra, which became the name of the platform and gives us our modern word rostrum. Today, if a political candidate wins their campaign, then they go to Capitol Hill, which was named by Thomas Jefferson and based on the famous Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill in ancient Rome. In fact, if you walk through Washington, D.C., it honestly feels like you're walking through ancient Rome because all of the federal buildings are done in the Greco-Roman style. If you look inside the House of Congress, you might notice two giant golden symbols on the walls which are called fasces. The fasces was a symbol of power in ancient Rome, which was a bundle of sticks tied together with an axe. The fasces symbolized the strength and unity of the Roman people. When Mussolini was looking to create a new political party to make Italy great again in the 1920s, he called it the Fascist Party, referring to the ancient Roman fasces. Just like Mussolini was inspired by ancient Rome, the United States was too. And when you start looking at American political culture, you'll see the fasces everywhere. For example, if you look at the Lincoln Memorial, you'll notice that he's resting his arms on two fasces. If you look at other statues of US presidents, you'll find many connections to ancient Rome, such as this statue of George Washington dressed in a Roman toga from 1840. But it's not just our political world that is dominated by ancient Rome. Our calendar comes from Rome too. The month of January refers to the Roman god Janus. The month of February comes from a Roman word referring to the animal skins that naked men used to whip women during the bizarre Lupercalia fertility festival. July is the month of Julius Caesar. August is the month of Augustus. Even the way that we keep track of time comes from a man that was made famous by being executed by the Romans. Whenever we say we're living in the year 2025, all we're saying is that it's been 2025 years since the birth of Jesus, who might have died in obscurity if it weren't for the fact that the Romans nailed him to a cross. Everywhere you look, our modern world is surrounded by references to ancient Rome. Rome cast such a long shadow over our world that for centuries people believed that the fall of Rome could help them understand the fate of their nations. In 1776, the English historian Edward Gibbon published the first volume of his classic The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And ever since then, historians have pointed out that this book is as much about the British Empire as it is about the Roman. By telling the story of how Rome fell, Gibbon was expressing British anxieties about how their own empire might fall. And the same anxieties have haunted the American empire too. In 2008, Cullen Murphy wrote a book called Are We Rome, where he compared modern-day America to ancient Rome and argued that the same factors that led to the fall of Rome may lead to the fall of the United States too. In the book, Murphy focuses on 6 parallels between modern America and ancient Rome. For example, he said, Rome prized its status as the city around which the world revolved. Official Washington shares that outlook, which leads to an exaggerated sense of importance. Another parallel concerns military power. For a variety of reasons, Rome and America both start to run short of the people they need to sustain their militaries, and both have to find new recruits wherever they can. A third parallel is privatization and corruption. Rome had trouble maintaining a distinction between public and private responsibilities. America has, in recent years, embarked on a privatization binge like no other in its history, putting into private hands all manner of activities once thought to be public tasks, collecting the nation's taxes, patrolling its streets, and defending its borders. Rome often disparaged people beyond its frontiers, and in many ways America's attitude is strikingly similar. The fifth parallel between Rome and America is the controversy over their borders, and the final parallel is that both empires eventually became too big and complex to effectively manage. One of my favorite documentaries is Michael Moore's 2009 film Capitalism: A Love Story, and it starts off by comparing the decline and fall of the Roman Republic to the United States.
Rome was the largest and the most beautiful city of the ancient world. The magnificent facade of the empire, however, could not conceal the seeds of decay. The unhealthy dependence of the economy on slaves, the disparity between rich and poor. Behind the splendor of the Forum were vast areas of crowded slums. Escape from the slums was difficult, for there were few jobs available and practically none for the unskilled. To keep idle citizens entertained and out of mischief, frequent games and spectacles were held at public expense. At first, only chariot races were sponsored, but by the reign of Trajan, brutal combat to the death had become popular. Earlier in Rome's history, elected representatives exercised the power, but by now every function of government had been absorbed by the emperor, who was above the law and ruled by decree. That a people as civilized as the Romans, with the most humane system of law ever devised, would tolerate the violation of human beings is astonishing. This imbalance and the irresponsible behavior of public officials would become major reasons for Rome's eventual decline.
The Roman Republic lasted for 450 years. The American Republic has lasted for almost 250 years, and it's questionable whether it will last for another 200. What is more likely is that the United States will suffer the same fate as the Roman Republic. I found it really interesting when Trump said that he would be a dictator on day one of his presidency. A reporter actually asked him if he considered himself a dictator, and he said he did not, and he was actually the exact opposite of a dictator. If we look back at Roman history, we'll remember that when Julius Caesar declared himself dictator for life, he was assassinated by the senators. This led to a destructive civil war between his adopted son Octavian and his top general Mark Antony. When Octavian won this civil war, he did not make the same mistake as Caesar by calling himself dictator. Instead, he called himself the princeps, which means first man among equals. However, in reality, Octavian ruled as a dictator in all but name. He convinced the Senate to go along with this charade, and they awarded him with a new name, Augustus, which means divinely favored. From this point forward, Rome was no longer a republic. It was an empire ruled by an emperor whose word was law. They still kept the illusion of a democracy, but those days were gone and they would never return. As we enter this uncertain time period with a president who wants to be an emperor, it would be wise to look back at ancient Rome because it still has much to teach us. We would be wise to listen to the Roman philosopher Seneca, who said, "Religion is regarded by the common people as true, by the wise as false, and by the rulers as useful." We would be wise to listen to the Roman poet, who told us that politicians stay in power by distracting the people with bread and circuses. We would be wise to listen to the words of Marcus Aurelius, who said, "My city and state are Rome, but as a human being, the world." So for me, good can only mean what's good for both communities. We all share a common law and are fellow citizens, and our state is the world. Everything is interwoven, and the web is holy. None of its parts are unconnected. They are composed harmoniously, and together they compose the world.